Welcome to another episode of This Week in Electro. And this week I want to have a discussion and talk about the kind of things you can experience when you're an apprentice. What is your apprenticeship going to be like? What sorts of things do you need to be aware of? So let's begin. When you start your apprenticeship, the first thing you are going to come across is going to be this feeling of being like a fish out of water. So if you imagine back when you began high school, the very first day of high school, you kind of didn't really know where anything was, you didn't really know many people, you had your friends, but it was a big, wide, new place and everything was just totally different. That's what it's going to feel like. The only difference is you won't have some of your friends there to help you this time. It'll literally be you. You'll turn up. There may be, depending on the job, depending on the company, I should say, there may be a couple of extra apprentices as well who'll be in the same shoes as you are. But generally that's not the case anymore. Most companies only put one apprentice on. So you'll be feeling a little bit displaced. And the first week will be the hardest week because unless you've already been working part-time and used to working late in the evenings or something like that, you're going to find your days much longer. So for most people in this trade, your day is going to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's when you actually physically start work. Depending on where you're working at, you may find that you're leaving home at 6 o'clock in the morning to get to the work site. So you turn up at the work site, and you should always turn up early. So you'll be turning up probably about 10 to 7, quarters to 7, and then you start work at 7. You won't finish then until probably about 3:30, maybe 4 o'clock, depending again on the hours that the company that you're working with keeps. So then by the time you get home, you get changed, it's going to be a really long day, and you're going to be on your feet all day long. You're not going to be sitting down anywhere other than at your morning tea break and your lunch break. So it's going to be a very, very long day for you. And that first week will feel like forever. But at the end of it, it's going to be exciting as well because you're going to be learning all sorts of new things. Now, this brings me to where is your position in this company that you've now signed up for. So you are really at the very, very bottom. You literally are. You will be learning new skills and you'll be expected to pick the skills up. So your tradesman will show you what to do and hopefully you'll be able to replicate that. And they'll start you off at the beginning, obviously, because they're not expecting you to know very much. And you're expected to learn and get better at these skills, which means practice. Practice makes perfect, obviously. But you'll find for the first few months, at least, most of the time, other than doing some menial work, cleaning up, sweeping, pushing the broom around, or doing stuff like that, most of the time you're going to be following the tradesmen around, watching what they do, listening to them, carrying their tools, and basically doing that kind of work. That is going to be the first few months of your apprenticeship. There is no way around it. That's how everybody begins. So you need to accept that. Don't think you're going to be wiring up a building on your first week. It's just not going to happen. You might be pulling cable to wire up that building, but that's probably about it. So with that in mind, then after you get through those first few months, and after you get to, or actually before you get through those first few months, I should say, generally most apprentices will start at the beginning of the year. If you've started maybe before Christmas, then you might have a couple of months lead up to this, but generally most apprentices are going to start at the beginning of the year. And that means then you're going to enroll into your technical college, or here in Australia we call it TAFE. So generally your employer will do most of that for you, but you still may have to turn up at the technical college with all your paperwork, etc., etc. Your employer will give you all that information. And then you enroll into your course, and you'll spend about 1 day every week going to tech and learning all of the theory. You will do some practical work while you're at TAFE or tech, but for the most part it's theory. That's where you learn the theoretical basis for all of the skills and the knowledge that you need to become a qualified tradesman. So you'll spend a day a week. Now that day may be a Wednesday, maybe a Friday. It all depends on when technical college run their courses, obviously. And Some employers, some organisations, some of the large ones actually do what they call an accelerated scheme. And the accelerated scheme is where they put their apprentices in TAFE 2 days a week, and they get the TAFE component done much, much quicker. And they do that so that way they can get the students out, they can get their apprentices out into the workforce full time, much, much quicker, and can be a little bit more productive, I guess, later on in their apprenticeship. But for most part, it's going to be 1 day a week. From that, you need to pass all of your exams, obviously, all of your competencies at TAFE. Your employer will be expecting you to pass all of your stuff, and they'll be keeping track of your record as you go, because that information is given back to the employer. So that's really, really important, that you study hard, and that if you do have questions, that you ask your tech teacher, ask the tradesman on the job, because your 4 days a week that you'll be doing with the company is your on-the-job training. That's your practical skills. That is your opportunity then to say, hey, listen, I did this work at TAFE the other day, and I'm really unsure how it works. How do you do this? And the tradesman will be more than happy to sit down and help you with that, especially if they can see that you're trying to learn, you want to learn. So that's really important to understand, that your theory underpins everything you do in your work life, and those tradesmen are there to help you. So once you get through all that, you've been working for maybe 6 months or so in your apprenticeship, you will be given more and more responsibility. So your tradesman will be more inclined to show you how to do something and leave you alone for a little bit to perform a particular task. Now, most of the time they'll be looking over you, looking over your shoulder and making sure you're doing everything correct, because ultimately they're going to be responsible for any work that you do. But they will give you more and more responsibility. And as you go throughout those 4 years, you'll have more and more responsibility to do work on your own or with other people in the organisation. When you finish your TAFE, which is generally about 3 years into your apprenticeship, then that means you have this last year, this 4th year, where you're working every day. And at that point, you're kind of expected to be pretty much a tradesman. You've done all the theory, you've done all of the competencies at tech, and now you should be working pretty much almost as a self-sufficient tradesman. And really that 4th year is, I guess, a transition year. That's its whole purpose, is to transition you from that idea of being the apprentice to the tradesman. So at the end of your 4 years, you are then a qualified tradesman and you can work as a tradesman. So at that point, you are given a lot more responsibility. And that obviously means at that point that, mistakes shouldn't be happening. You can't really blame that, if you do a mistake, you can't really say, look, I didn't know how to do that, or I didn't realize this, or, whatever the case may be. At that point, you're expected to be much, much more wise in regards to how to do your work. Now, the other thing you're going to find throughout these 4 years is you're going to be on, I would assume, mostly different job sites, depending on what company you're working for. You're going to be working all over the place. And you are going to come into contact with people that you may not particularly get on with, or maybe that you struggle to work well with. Now, as an apprentice, unfortunately, this is where you just have to suck it up. And obviously, you don't want to put up with harassment or anything like that, of course. But there are going to be people where you just don't get on with. That's just the way it is. And you just have to suck it up and just keep on doing your job and keep on working. Because at the end of the day, you are still at the lowest end of the ladder. You're still at the bottom. You are not a qualified tradesman yet. And some people can be really hard to work with. They really can. So keep that in mind. Remember where your place is in the company and on the job site. When I remember working for a company, and I remember going onto this job site, and we had this one particular apprentice. He was a nice enough guy, and I had only been working with the company for a few months. I didn't know who he was, and he was bossing everybody around and saying, "Oh, look, you need to go over and wire this up. You need to do that, etc., etc." And I thought to myself, this guy is very young to be a foreman. And I chatted to one of the other tradesmen. I said, "Oh, look," I said, what's this guy's deal? He's, full on." And the tradesman turned to me and laughed. He said, "Oh, that's our apprentice foreman." Because this apprentice, he was a nice enough guy, but the problem was He just liked to think he was already running the show and liked to throw his weight around, but he was only a fourth-year apprentice. He hadn't even finished his apprenticeship yet. So there are going to be people which you'll find, interesting and sometimes hard to work with. And as an apprentice, remember your place. If a tradesman asks you to do something, then you need to go and do it. Unless of course it's unsafe. Which brings me to something else that's really important, regardless, throughout your 4 years of working as an apprentice. Remember, you had the right to be safe. So your tradesman cannot ask you to do anything that is unsafe or that you feel unsafe in doing. Safety is really common sense. It really is common sense. You know yourself that if you're climbing a ladder and you lean out over from the top of that ladder, that is probably not a very safe thing to do. So, if you're asked to do that, don't do it. Get down and move the ladder. Make it safe, okay? You have that right to be working in a safe working environment. So that's really all there is to it as working apprentice. You're there to learn. That's what you're there to do, and you're there to become a tradesman. So you need to step up and take that responsibility and take on that learning. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got a goal, and your goal is to become a tradesman, and this is what you need to do. So I hope this has been a little bit informative. I may make some more videos that deal with this particular topic in the future. I might delve a little bit deeper into what is required as an apprentice, but as a good overview, this is it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.